Hello, everybody. Welcome to this little lunch and hour session on corporate fundraising. Now, apologies needs to go to Dell because Dell has already had me for an hour on a different training course this morning. So there we go. My name is David Page. Met a few of you, I know, but there's a few new names on the page for me as well. I work with Triceratops Training, and we do training and one-to-one support for, especially for small charitable organisations. So do come and check us out. One of the areas we support folks with is fundraising, because fundraising's hard, isn't it? And we need a bit of help and support. And fundraising is carved up into lots of different bits, of which corporate fundraising, which we're talking about this morning, is one of them. So let me share my screen. And because we're slightly tight on time, we've only got an hour together, I think what we'll do is we shall dive right into it. So corporate fundraising. And if you want the slides from this or the recording, Savs can hook you up with that. Please do check them out, as well as checking us out at Triceratops Training. There we go. Anyway, where are we going? Housekeeping. That's where we're going, first of all. For those of you who are live with us on the session today, we always start by saying, please do be polite. Never have an issue with that. But also do get involved, and feel free to get involved. If you want to ask a question, the chat box is there for you. You can type in a wee question there, and I've got it over there, so I should see it, and we'll address that at an appropriate time. If you have a question that comes to your mind and it's after today's session, or for the folks that are maybe watching this on record, then my email address, david@triceratopstraining.co.uk, is always open to you. I mean, I'm not going to respond to you at 2:00 in the morning if you email me at 2:00 in the morning, but I will get back to you as well. Great. The format of today, it's just going to be quite a lot of me talking. That's why questions are quite important if you're here with us live. And I do apologise because my voice is going. So if I have to stop and have a wee cough or have a wee cup of tea, do forgive me. So where are we going today then? Well, this is the journey that we're going to go on together. We're going to start at the very beginning and just define what we actually mean by corporate fundraising, because it's one of the poorest named streams of fundraising that there are. And then we're going to think about how we can potentially find these corporates that we can fundraise with. And then think about as well, hang on a minute, which ones should we be going for? Because you don't have the capacity to chase every opportunity that's out there. So it's important that we think about chasing the right ones. And then at the end, which hopefully we'll have plenty of time for, we'll think about how we go about building up and pursuing these relationships. Grand. So I think we should begin right at the beginning, should we? What is corporate fundraising? Well, let's start by agreeing what these partnerships are, actually. Now, like all fundraising activities, corporate fundraising is built on relationships. However, these relationships in corporate fundraising are different from the relationships we find in other kinds of fundraising. And it sets it apart on its own, actually. Now, what we have on the slide here is a model that's called the Strategic Collaboration Continuum, which sounds very grand, doesn't it? And actually, I've simplified it a bit here because it's a bit more complex than that. But anyway, and typically in our organizations, I tend to use the catch term of charity, but if you're a CIC or a constituted group or even a grassroots organization, if I say charity, I'm talking about you as well. And typically within our charities, we can group the relationships that we have into these three categories. So on one end, we've got philanthropic. Think of donors, think of volunteers, maybe trustees. They've all got different motivations for giving their money or their time or their expertise. But generally, they give because they care. They've got a vested interest, we could say. They're giving out of the kindness of their hearts because they want to see the world a better place. So individual donors would fit neatly in this philanthropic kind of category. And then at the other end, we've got our strategic partnerships. Now, that tends to be where our organizations work very closely with other organizations. So it might be you partner with other charities on projects, or maybe you work with different agencies or maybe councils to provide a particular service that is required. Large trusts and foundations can also be seen as strategic partnerships because they want to achieve through giving grants to you. And that would fall under that bracket. Now, today, we need to be thinking about this middle one, which is why it's bright yellow, transactional. Because what we're thinking about in these partnerships or these relationships with corporates is the whole idea of if you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. It's transactional. It's very two-way. And while philanthropic thoughts do play a role in it, you know, people who work in these businesses do want to see the world made a better place. It's not as prevalent in corporate fundraising, typically, as it is with individual donors, for example. And while we do need to see these as partnerships, they don't tend to be as scary or daunting as maybe officially partnering with an agency or a charity might be. What we're actually doing here is we're approaching these relationships as business transactions. It's quite simple in that way. When we buy a pair of shoes, we enter into a business transaction. We win from that because we get a new pair of shoes that makes us feel really good. And the business wins because they make a profit, and that allows their CEO to fly around in a helicopter at weekends. It's transactional. They scratch our back, we scratch theirs. And that's the world that we're stepping into. But corporate fundraising really is poorly named. And the first part of it that falls down really is the idea that this is just fundraising. It's not really. It's a partnership that we're looking for. Fundraising applies in inequality. Folks are giving money to us so we can go and make a change. But what we really want in our corporate relationships is a partnership. We want to be doing things together, and the best partnerships, of course, are equal. And that presents the biggest risk in my experience of corporate partnerships is when this partnership becomes unequal, because unequal partnerships can cause headaches down the road. And we'll probably touch on that again a bit later and how we can potentially avoid that. But it's a warning, actually, that's worth putting out of the bag right away, early doors, is that if these partnerships aren't equal, it's likely going to be you that's left scrabbling, trying to pick up from the dirt. There was one charity that I know, and they spent their time working and improving the lives of disabled folk. And they actually spent more money managing the partnership with the business than they actually got back in financial terms, or volunteer hours, actually. And it's completely turned them off of corporate relationships. So just be careful. Partnership is what we're looking for. And then that word corporation also leads us into a bit of bother. Because when we're talking about partnership, corporate partnerships, yeah, we are talking about partnering with big corporations like banks and Tesco and that kind of thing. But actually, as smaller charitable organizations, we'd actually be wiser thinking of businesses, not corporations, but businesses of all shapes and sizes, from the self-employed all the way through to the mega corporations. You know, high street shops, your local lawyers, your estate agents, double glazing companies, landscapers, take your pick. It's there. How to choose which one to pursue, we'll cover a bit later on, but it's important not to pigeonhole yourself into thinking that you can only partner with Sainsbury's because that's the only one that you see doing this kind of thing. We want to choose the right partner. And that might have sounded a wee bit bold at the start of the session when I said that. But when you think about all of the businesses that are around your neck of the woods, those that you visit yourself, those that others that are involved with your charities utilize, you can see actually there's a lot of choice out there. And most businesses are very happy to have the conversation. It's also not just fundraising. It's not just corporations. It's not just fundraising. Because the overall value of the relationships that you can get out of these partnering with businesses is much, much bigger than just the cash. There was the Civil Commission, the Law Family Commission on Civil Society, released a paper, and it was back in 2019. And they found out that the non-cash value of these partnerships was about 6 times the size of the cash value. So if you're engaging with a business and they're giving you, I don't know, let's say £5,000, then the other benefits that you can get out of it, you could hope that would total up to about £30,000. Because these relationships, these partnerships require just more, or, seek to bring just more than just a check every now and then. Quite often staff will be given volunteering days. Now, the old kind of thing that goes around in my mind is, do you have any walls that need to be painted? Because that's what staff like to do. But actually, they can give you skills. I was working with one of my clients, and they partnered with a local marketing company. They were actually on the same street as their offices of the charity. And that marketing company gave them a full rebrand. That's probably worth about 10 grand just in itself, even if you never actually see that. A care home that I know got their gardens manicured in the spring and in the autumn again by a really obscure department within Barclays Bank. The reason they got that is because one of the employees of that department had an old friend who lived in the care home that was being looked after. The connection was made. Quite clever. There's lots of benefits that are in there. Specialist skills being one that I think is really important for small charities to try and access if they can. But you might also benefit from mates rates, maybe even some pro bono contracts or supplies if you can. You've also got benefits there about, cross-pollination of your marketing lists. So more people hear about your organization and what you do, especially if that business is saying, we're partnering with this charity. Why don't you go and have a look at what they're doing? Because they're awesome. And it's important, as we'll look at a bit later on, to fully understand the benefits that you can get out of the partnerships. I found out about a really lovely partnership on a larger scale than maybe we're thinking about today. But it was with the Royal Mail and a charity based down somewhere in your neck of the woods, I think, actually, who looked after, or was a charity there to help parents find missing children. And what they did was the Royal Mail, the postmen have those scanners that they use to take photos and to scan parcels and whatnot. They partnered with the charity so that the postman would see photos flashing up on that of missing children in the area of their beat. And in 6 months, they found 15 missing children. That's a brilliant example of a partnership that's not focused on money, but actually help that organization achieve what it set out to do and find missing kids. So there's much, much more on the table here than just cash, though we do want cash to be part of it. Of course we do. So let's park that, because that's what we can get out of it. But what can they get out of it? Remember, it's transactional. You're likely to refine these to your own context, but even the smallest charity has significant strategic advantages to offer a company. So we start with the obvious one that we've already mentioned: promotion. They promote you to their mailing list. You can make it clear to those who know you that you're partnering with that company, that co-promotion. Excuse me. They can also benefit from your expertise if you have something that fits what they need. I'm up in Glasgow, and there's a mental health charity up here in Glasgow, and they partner with businesses to provide counselling services to their staff should they need them. That's a slightly above cost price, and there's a financial gift, every year that needs to come in from the business as a what do you call it? As an expected fee, a minimum fee that comes through. But that business gets to access that charity's specialist skills. That might be relevant for you. Now, more than ever, and this is potentially the biggest part of it, customers are increasingly demanding that companies demonstrate a social conscience. They demonstrate their social credentials. People are moving their pension funds into green pension funds. Their mortgages are moving to ethical banks. And partnering with a charity is the most straightforward way and economical way, typically, for a business to flash their social credentials, to attract more customers. And the next point, actually, staff engagement rolls into that really well. So it's not just customers that want to know that the businesses they're doing business with are making the world a better place, but staff want to know that as well. And in a recruitment environment where it's increasingly hard to both keep hold of staff and attract new staff, allowing companies to talk about their relationship with you is going to help them in that, because staff want to know that their work is making the world a better place at the same time as paying their mortgage or rent as well. All of this added together adds up to one big win for the company, which is what they'll be interested in. And that is the whole idea of a competitive advantage, an advantage they can exploit, actually, to keep their staff employed, to keep their lights on, or to buy their CEO a helicopter. The good news for us is we can make it work for us as well. So there's wins for them. There's wins for us. We're approaching this on a transactional state of play. So where do we go to find these potential partners? There's this thing called a Charity of the Year program, which you may have heard of. And bigger businesses, like your Tesco's and stuff, Quick Fit and things like that, they'll tend to have they may have an application process where you can write or be nominated by a staff member to become their Charity of the Year. Some of them are very easy and you have to put in hardly any effort. Most of them require quite a lot of effort to get it. And for the year, you're their champion charity, and their staff do fundraising events for you, and it can be really, really useful. And you can find them through the directory for social change if you're willing to pay them, or you can just do a bit of a search and have a look and hit the ground running with that. Now, that's very good, but I think that takes a lot of work. And I don't think you folks have that much time to be wasting. So you can pursue that. If the opportunity arises, it's important to know it's there. But what I find works much better for small organizations is where you go and think about, right, what businesses do we already know? You can do this network mapping exercise where you just lay it out on a bit of paper that looks like this. Excuse me. And you think about what companies you're connected to through your organization. Your printing company, your power company, your lawyers, your accountants, folks like that, What I find better though is if you don't put your organization's name in the middle, but you put your own, or you put the names of your trustees and you give this to your trustees to do. And instead of saying staff and funders and media, you actually put down groupings of people in your life, school friends, university friends, maybe book group, folks from church or synagogue, and neighbors. And then you start thinking about, right, who do they work for? Is there any potential there for me? My next door neighbor runs a pub in town. And he has said to me, Dave, if you ever want to put on an event or you ever know a charity that wants to put on an event, please do have a conversation with me. He's interested in that world because he knows he'll probably sell quite a lot of pints. My neighbor two doors down, he runs a company that looks after warehouses and does like the factoring kind of servicing for them. There's absolutely no scope in that because his big boss, who actually owns the company, has got no interest in charitable work whatsoever. He's a horrible, horrible creature by the sounds of things. Um, so I can tick that off. But actually, the whole idea of just going out for a walk and thinking about, right, what businesses do I frequent? Who do I know that potentially works there? That's a really good way of bringing together your shortlist. And as we've got on the slide here, there's two things that you need to consider because there's probably going to be 150 businesses on that list. How well do we know this company? And what do we have in common? So when we say how well do we know this company, think about how warm we are to the business. Maybe you use the hairdressers and so you natter away to them once a month and you know them. Or maybe you know that the restaurant prides itself on excellence in its food and its service. That's something that appeals to you. Maybe your accountants are really honest and transparent. And that's a good thing. They might not know much about your organization, your charity. And that's okay because we can build this up. And these kind of relationships do take time to build up. But you're not starting from scratch because you know about that business. But that's still going to give us a list that's probably far too long. So the second consideration of what do we have in common is really important. Maybe you serve the same communities. Maybe you offer the same kind of support, but in very different angles. Maybe their people look like your people. There's lots of different options of what you might have in common. And let's maybe think about that in a wee bit more detail in the next session. So what we're going to do is I just want you to think, right, you've been out for a walk and you've maybe taken a little log over a month of what businesses you've gone and you've engaged with. And you've got a long list now of businesses and you've had a little look at it and you've thought, nah, that's not a good fit. That's not a good fit. And you've crossed a few out. And so now it's a shorter list. And we need to start thinking, right, what can we do or which partner should we choose to give us the best chance of success? And a little hint, building from what we just said, the best partners tend to have the biggest compatibility with you. Because what you're really looking for is an overlap. A mission mesh is what we officially call it. This is where our kind of missions as a business and as a charity overlap or converge, maybe. And the larger the mesh, the better the partnership is likely to be. So the first thing you want to do is have a look at the people that you're both serving, their customers, your clients, service users, or communities. Do these people look similar, sound similar? Are they similar in where they live? Do they behave in similar ways? Gillette partnering up with Movember Gillette, the shaver company, and Movember, the moustache charity. Like, I mean, they both target the same audience, men. Nothing more complex than that, but it works. So after you've looked at the people, then you want to have a look at what the business does. Is there a common theme there? Halfords, the bike and car shop, partnered with a charity called Recycle, who send unwanted bikes over to Africa. There's a commonality there of bikes. You see what I'm getting at? Looking for the mesh. Then you can think about how you work. Are there similarities here? In Glasgow City Mission, homelessness addressing charity, no, it does lots more, partnered with hotels to find people temporary accommodation. There's a mesh there. And then the big one, I think, that is really easy to overlook. The big one is to think about their values. If your potential partner exists to maximize profit no matter the cost, does that gel with you? You're not going to necessarily want to partner with Primark or with Asda George or with Shein, who are widely known as using extremely dodgy processes in their supply chains. But actually, you might want to. You might want to take bad money and turn it for good. There was a gambling charity that partnered with Ladbrokes. And the gambling charity made sure that Ladbrokes had like opt out and guide, assistance for addicted gamblers to go to the charity and find out how to address their issues. But they took the money from Ladbrokes and had that partnership. It's an interesting one there. The Edwards Trust, it's a bereavement charity, helping people through bereavement, usually of children, but not exclusively. They partnered up with Irwin Mitchell Solicitors, specifically their medical negligence. And what that charity does is it helps train the solicitors that work in that particular sensitive arm of the business in how to deal with bereaved families. And that's in exchange of use of facilities. They use their offices and for volunteering hours from those lawyers. So the Edwards Trust can connect their folks to lawyers should they need to. It's clever, isn't it? Looking for the overlap. Sometimes the overlap is obvious. Sometimes the overlap is, it needs a bit of digging to find. But sometimes it's just a bit of serendipity. This charity, with this quote, works with communities in South America. And their coffee that they had was sourced from an ethical partnership based in South America. Sorry. And good conversations found a mesh through the coffee that they served. It can be that simple. We tend to overcomplicate things. But if we've got our eyes open for opportunities and we're confident in talking about what our organization sets out to achieve, then potential partnerships can occasionally just fall into our lap. I work with a charity, or I've just finished with them actually, up in Peterborough. And they get regular calls from businesses. They're fielding about 2 a month from local businesses that want to partner with them because word has got out that they're really good to be partnering with. And the businesses want a slice of that pie because it's going to give them a competitive advantage. That's maybe a slight nirvana that we're not ready for yet, or we're not at yet. But that kind of thing can come because businesses can get so much out of these partnerships if we're doing them well. But let's take the bull by the horns ourselves. And let's take the view that we are going to go and talk to businesses instead of just sitting and hoping that they're going to come to us. We're going to be proactive. That's what we're going to do. So How do we engage with these businesses? Well, first of all, we need to do a bit of homework and a bit of reflection, actually. What is it that we want from this potential partnership with this particular company? Not generally. We're talking specifics now because we've got our long list and we've now turned it into a short list and we've prioritized it as well. Another way of asking that question is, why is this particular company higher up our list than others? Understanding what you need from this deal to make it worthwhile is really important. If they're unable to deliver it, then the partnership's either going to need work, or it might need a lighter touch, or it might not work at all. Plus, giving this kind of forethought and this planning to what you want, when you do engage in conversations with businesses, it's going to demonstrate your professionalism. And that's really the hat that you want to be wearing when you're approaching this kind of business partnership. You want to be seen as professional. Is there an expectation of a donation through this relationship? How much do you want? See, when you take corporate fundraising to its next level or its biggest level, and you're sitting, what happens is you approach a big corporation, and if traction is there, you end up sitting down and negotiating with them. We want you to make a gift of £50,000. And they say, no, that's too much money. We'll make a gift of 10. And you say 40. And they say, no, 20. And then sometimes you settle in the middle. Sometimes they walk away. Sometimes you walk away. And actually, that kind of thing, whilst we're probably never going to get down into that kind of official, formal wrestling match when we're engaging with smaller businesses on a one-to-one basis, you still need to know how much you think is going to make this partnership worthwhile. And be open and honest about that. Don't be shy. Don't give them the upper hand. Know how much. Same goes for what you want their staff to offer you through volunteering, potentially. Or do you want them to do fundraising activities for you, which you will support as an organization? What about skills or guidance that you would like to access? It's important to know this stuff before you actually do any talking. Thinking out and planning, it makes sure that you've got a clear idea of what you want. And also, it's going to go and it's going to build your confidence too. It can also be a good idea to prioritize what you want. So when you are potentially negotiating, you know what's important and you know what you can kind of just throw in and then leave at the side to help you in this process as well. So the first thing when it comes to planning is being sure about what you want. After that, we want to move on and think about what do they want. And this is where we kind of come up with our sales pitch. What can you offer them? Can you give access to your networks? Can you add their logo to your mailing list? Can you give them recognition? Could you name a room after them for the time that you're in a partnership together? Could you promote them online, maybe in your annual report? Could you offer them team building services, skills development? What else? Could you offer to speak at a conference on their behalf? Or award them an accreditation? Maybe. I was organising the Scottish Fundraising Conference, which we had a week or so ago. And I had the honour of presenting a fundraising award. And there was an award presented for the best corporate partnership. And what that corporate partnership was didn't really matter. It was Ryanair and a nurses charity. But anyway, the boss, not the big boss, but one of the directors of Ryanair was there to collect the award. I was really impressed by that, but it showed the depth and the value of that, the recognition that they were having, because that award was going to go straight on their wall in the offices. pulling together a list of potential options of what you could offer them is going to just give you that confidence. They're going to be doing the exact same thing. And they're going to be thinking, right, well, this is what we want to get out of it. This, and this. And you meet in the middle. So as well as having that, you also need to be prepared to evidence the impact that your organization has, to prove that you make the world a better place is another way of saying the same thing. How are you going to show them that? How are you going to show them that when we're in this initial meeting, maybe sitting down, sharing a coffee and a slice of cake? Well, you wouldn't share a coffee, would you? You'd have your own. But how are you going to feed that back and show them that as the relationship develops? Could you invite them for a tour? Could you connect them directly with your service users so they can experience the difference firsthand? Remember, we're looking for a balanced partnership here. So if you put in more effort, then you should expect to get more reward too. So the bigger your promises, the more you should be receiving out of this. Once you've thought out both sides of the offer, it's then time to reach out. And typically, this is the kind of flow that the relationships will go in. You do your research. That's what we've been talking about. You make an initial connection. Chances are you've already made that initial connection because you use that hairdresser. And so you know the folks. Or it's your brother-in-law's company or something like that. But then it's important to actually make it a bit more formal and say, right, I want to sit down to you to see if there's any way that we could work together, our charity and your business. And you sit down and have an initial meeting. Now, that might be in their office. It might be in Costa. It might be sharing a bottle of wine in your back garden in the summer. Depends on the relationship you have with that business. But at that initial meeting, am I jumping ahead of myself a bit here? Am I? No. At that initial meeting, it's important that you just get to know each other. Don't jump in with 2 feet immediately and say, this is what I'm proposing. Get the lay of the land first. And if you can get a second meeting, then that'll be really useful. Stakeholder meetings, it might be that you need to involve others in this relationship, in this chat. And so that's just what a stakeholder meeting is. And then what I suggest you do is you write out a formal proposal. And that formal proposal outlines what you're putting in and it outlines what you're expecting to get out. And that morphs into a formal partnership agreement, which we'll talk about in a little while. But let's think about this formal proposal. Excuse me. The proposal is what we use to create that formal agreement that comes next, and we'll talk about on the next slide. We want this, as I've just said, to set out what we expect from the partnership in terms of benefits and in terms of the actions that we're going to do as well. You want to do the same for the business as well. The proposal highlights their benefits and what they're promising to do as well. And when you're writing up a proposal and you put it out on paper and you send it through to them to have a look at, they might come back with a counter offer or might adjust things. And that's fine if that happens. That's just negotiating. That's the business world that we're stepping into. Now, when you're writing this proposal, we are wanting to maintain that professional air that we've built up, hopefully, through our conversations so far. And it does need to be formal, but keep it concise. Keep it clear and short. It should be formatted as a report rather than a narrative, for example. And when you're doing with this, you want to start with a bit of context. It helps set the scene, really, and make sure that this context highlights quite loudly the mesh of your two organizations and why you are working together. Think people, think service as well. And then move on to talk about the benefits. The benefits for both. It's important to be transparent. We're hoping to get this out of this, which is why we're doing it. You're expecting to get this out of it, which is why you're doing it. You don't have to go into uber detail on the benefits, but make sure there's a few key measurable benefits there. And usually those are the ones that come to the surface quickest in your conversations and your relationship building with them. After that, move on to the responsibilities, the actions required from each party. They're to make you a gift of £5,000, maybe, if that's appropriate. You're to speak at their AGM and present about the partnership. Don't put too much in here. Don't promise the world because you're really excited about that £5,000, especially when you're starting out doing this. Because these actions all add up to a drain on your time. And you will need to invest time. There's no way about that. And the time will probably need to be invested by leadership of your organizations. But you don't want to promise too much because this relationship is likely going to be a burden to them as much as it is to you. A good burden because we come out of it with benefits, but it will be a burden. And to help mitigate this, it's important to set boundaries. Set a deadline date when you're going to review things. Excuse me. And decide if you're going to continue or not. You might also want to include in your proposal a case study as well. If the decision maker on behalf of the business is on board with this idea, all of this can happen really, really very quickly. However, sometimes there can be a bit of to and fro, and it can take a bit longer. Years in some cases, actually. But don't read too much into that. Sometimes the easiest relationships to start are the quickest ones to break down. And the hardest relationships can actually last for years. So you're writing this proposal, you're being very clear on what you're expecting. And what you want to do then is just morph that proposal, once it's been agreed, into a formal partnership agreement. It's not legally binding, but it gives you something to fall back on should the partnership become unequal, if they maybe don't pull their weight in the way that you wanted them to. It gives you this agreement that has been signed by the key stakeholders to fall back on and say, come on, you said this, when can we expect it? You could actually take them to court, but I wouldn't do that. It's a waste of time and money. So be clear on your targets, be clear on the actions, the impact report. Well, we've just talked about that already, haven't we? This, in small charity, corporate fundraising, is my biggest top tip. Have that formal agreement to fall back on. Because, as I said at the start, the largest issue with them is that unequal partnership. They're hard to manage. But if you've got this as your foundation document, you're on a foundation. You're not just floating. You're not just hoping. Because they've actually promised you, which you have in writing, that this will happen. And it also reinforces the idea that you're professional. And that's a really good thing. So managing relationships in this area can be tricky. It can be really, really wonderful at the same time. I was doing some work for the Bank of Scotland, and it was a bit of kind of CSR, as we called it back then, work. And there was a partnership in a branch between the branch and a charity that helped families dealing with cystic fibrosis. And a few other conditions as well. And through that partnership, the CEO of the charity and the manager of the branch actually became really good social friends. because they just worked together and they were good people and they met other good people and they connected. And that relationship was a joy to manage because it was just really straightforward. But that's not always the way it happens, I'm afraid. Now, the biggest thing and the best thing that you can do is to come through and deliver on your promises. Lead that relationship if you need to. Chase them up if you need to. Pick up the phone or visit the office if they're not replying to emails. Take the relationship from transactional to transformational. I must have had a coffee when I wrote that one. Keep an eye on the progress of what's happening. Monitor against your KPIs and your targets that you might have set, and check that the business is happy with how things are progressing. If they've given you £5,000, let them know what you've spent it on. Introduce them to the folks that benefit from it, because that business is people, and people deserve to see what their generosity has achieved. If they express concerns over the benefits that they as the business are getting out of it, listen to those concerns. What can you do to help them get benefits out of it? Because if they're not going to get benefits out of it, this relationship's going to come to an end when we really want to see it continue. Because it's a lot easier to continue and renew a relationship than it is to start from scratch. And I think that is the big point, maybe, when it comes to managing these relationships. Remember that you're trying to retain this relationship, this partnership. So make sure that when good things happen, you pass some of that credit on to the business. You pass that credit in the same way as you would to your standard donors or your volunteers, for example. Take a step back as a charity and say, no, you're giving, you're volunteering, you're sharing of skills. That actually did that. It wasn't much us, it was you. Because that's brilliant. And that's going to rope them in. And that's where our transactional relationships verge over to the philanthropic, because we are still dealing with people. Also, make sure you're transparent. You're honest, you're truthful. If something's not right or it's not working, voice that. Don't just sit on it. Understand that partnerships work flexibly. Even though you've got this agreement, be flexible in your approach. Be kind, good humans, like you would if you were dealing with service users, but be assertive if you feel you're being taken advantage of. The more that you do this, the more you practice it, the better and more experienced you're going to be with corporate partnerships. It's really better to fix and manage expectations early on, actually, than fail to deliver time and time again. Now, one question. We just go 10 minutes left, so that's good. We'll come to the end. One question that I get asked quite often is, Dave, should we partner with big companies or should we look and partner with smaller companies? And different people in my position will have different responses to that. Some will say, no, forget about small businesses because they haven't got deep pockets. They tend to not know what they're doing. So partner with big businesses that know what they're doing is easier. My response to that is it might be easier, but it's not an equal partnership. That big corporation has very little to lose if this relationship goes south. You will have a lot to lose. And so that's not equal. Some say it doesn't matter going for big or small. Just go and chase the opportunities. And I would say 100% yes. Just be aware that if you are going into a business negotiation with a big business, they've got people who are paid to negotiate. You're going to need to sit down at a boardroom table and price up the package in financial terms of what you can offer them. And that's something that I am not equipped to do. I've got no experience of doing that. And unless you've got a trustee maybe who has got that kind of business acumen, that's not a normal environment. And it's not just something you pick up and come out of the room with an equal partnership. It's not how it works. So I totally admire the sentiment of, yes, chase that opportunity. Just be aware that you might need to pick up the phone and call for help at crunch time if you're dealing with big organizations. And then there's folks like me who say, go for smaller organizations, go for local businesses, because you've got a much better chance of having an equal partnership. The problem with that is there's a fair chance that they haven't got a clue how to approach these relationships either. And so it can be a wee bit of a case of the blind leading the blind. I would much rather be in an equal relationship where we're stumbling through slightly and we're muddling things up and we're both making mistakes than a partnership which is unequal. That's how I fall on it. You might disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine, because you're you and you need to follow, what makes sense to you. I would also always say, if you're new into this, have a look at local businesses first and learn with them. So you get more experience and you get more confidence, and then you can start spreading your wings and flying a bit further. There we go. That's brought us to the end of this little lunch now. Are there any questions that you would like to ask? Bearing in mind we are recording, you can unmute and ask, or you can pop it in the chat. And sorry again for my voice, it's definitely on the way out now. Is there anything you want to ask?
Can I ask a quick question?
I'm for it, Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi. So I work for an addiction recovery charity. We offer a 12-week program for people to attend. So where you're speaking about like the gambling and addiction pairing with like Ladbrokes or something like that, do you think it's worth a charity like mine sort of approaching large alcohol companies and things like that?
No, that's a decision for trustees and leadership to make. Nobody else can make that decision for you. There's nothing in the fundraising regulator guide that says you can't do that. The thing you need to think about is, how is this going to affect the people that we work with? If they're not going to be bothered by it, and it's not going to hamper their progression, through your work, then in my mind, I don't see why not. You're taking dirty money and you're turning it to good. But if you do that, there is a risk of reputational damage should something go wrong. Like if one of your if you're sponsored by Foster's, for example, and one of your clients is found walking down the street, smashed with 2 cans of Foster's in their hands and a leaflet that you've got as well, that looks bad.
Yeah, it looks bad. Yeah.
But it's weighing up the two. And it depends how risk averse you are as an organisation, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Hiya, can I ask a question, please?
Of course you can, Nesma. Hi.
Hi, thank you. For me, it's about these big corporates, and obviously it will be a cold lead. How do I kind of like make it a warm lead, considering that obviously I won't even have the contact details of those big guns that I need to be talking to? For example, like kind of like these big corporates, isn't it? To kind of like get in touch with the right person is an issue. So how do I kind of like work on that barrier?
Research and networking is the answer to that. Neither of which are that much fun, to be honest. Excuse me. So you can go and do a bit of research, have a little look on LinkedIn. You might be finding people who work in that kind of particular part of the organization. Look out for the acronym ESG. That stands for environmental and social governance. That's charity stuff with businesses. It used to be called CSR, which was corporate social responsibility, but that term isn't used so much anymore. And some companies will have a web page that talks all about that and how to connect, and that's really useful because you've got your guide there straight away. Many won't, so you have to go and do a bit of networking, talking to people. You can use LinkedIn if you want to do that as well, but that's hard, really hard. It's much, much easier to go down a path that you already have a warm contact. Unless there's an amazing mesh between your organization and that business, I wouldn't, if you're starting in this for the first time, that's not where I would put my first footsteps. I would go and do it where we're going to get a yes. And that's with warm folks who know you, either personally or they know your organization. But yeah, research and networking, if you do want to unlock that, is how you would go about that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because I did kind of like try, or our company has been trying kind of like to get some of those leads, but to get a warm contact, to just turn that cold even into a slightly lukewarm, is proving a little bit difficult, obviously because of like I said, the relationships. We won't know anyone, and to kind of like even put your foot through the door sometimes is proving that difficult because we are kind of like being blocked out by, I don't know if you can call them the guards outside, if it makes sense.
There's a friend of mine who works in the faith area of the third sector, and he has a saying, which is, if you want to access a church, never talk to the minister. Always talk to the little old ladies. With a business, if you want to access them, see if you talk to a staff member rather than the chief, then the staff member can speak on your behalf. It adds extra kudos. It adds extra connection. So you could potentially try that. So.
Okay, thank you. So try to kind of like, okay, I get you. Thank you.
Perseverance will get you through. That's us out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope the session will prove useful in the future. If you need to watch it back again, check Sav's. We've got the recording for you. The slides are with Sav's as well, or if they're not, I'll send them around soon after. So if you want access to them, please do just ask. Feel free to connect with me as well. My email address is on the screen. I'm on LinkedIn /page David Page, and also Triceratops Training. We're here. Give us your email address, and when we put up free training courses, I'll email you and let you know. Excellent. Thank you for making the world a bit of a better place, and we shall hopefully see you sometime soon.